and perks and did not report that income to the IRS. And Cardinal George Pell, one-time financial advisor to Pope Francis, has died. He was 81. I'm Carmen Roberts. This is Fox News.
All three stations, all three morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top three best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top three radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizava. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's a good way to start a radio show when the radio show concentrates on Second Amendment, gun rights, freedom, liberty, patriotism, the greatness of the United States, and similar topics. So if that's what you're interested in, man, you've come to the right place. If it's not what you're interested in, you've really come to the right place, because you need a little learning in the process here. And that's what you'll get at Tall Tales. The show starts out with a feature called Zemi Ikotni. As my backwards bilingual play on words translates literally to press the meat, I turn it around so it's meet the press, except we're a whole lot better than the meet the press you can pick up on PMS NBC with Chuck Todd or whoever's running that show nowadays. This one is a whole lot better. I'm sure you'll agree as you enjoy the program this afternoon. I go through the editorials from our two daily newspapers with my blue pencil right here. And my hidden English teacher comes out. I mark them up unmercifully. And having determined which of the two is the better, it will receive the coveted blue star if it meets minimum meritocracy thresholds. The blue star never goes by default. But I haven't been able to do that for about the last 3 months because apparently the editorial boardroom over at the Post is on strike. They don't do editorials anymore, except maybe in their news holes.
I think Public Defender Santos is now doing the editorial because it's a repeat.
Who is doing it?
Pete Santos.
Pete Santos, yeah. You had to say it again, right?
I had to say it again.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the Daily News offer today. Man, this is real dynamite. This will be controversial for a long, long time. Our view: stay abreast of latest weather advisories. For as many news stories of weather alerts and advisories as the Daily News is privileged to share with our readers, it warrants being said often. Heed the advice of our weather officials, especially when it comes to outdoor recreational activities. When it comes to indoor recreational activities, you're probably pretty safe not being too concerned about the weather. Then they talk about the fire department and the rescue unit and a couple of cases here. The tragedy of Margaret Hattori Uchima, a good swimmer who drowned, etc. they ought to mention Jeff's Pirates Cove, because I got a feeling that on a statistical basis, the folks at Jeff's Pirates Cove probably save more lives than the folks in the fire department do.
If you're going to be stupid and go out in bad weather, Jeff's Pirates Cove is the place to be.
Exactly, yeah. If it's a day like today and you're looking for a good place to eat, have a cool one and go swimming, if you got to go swimming, go to Jeff's. You got a better chance of surviving.
I'm sure they'd much rather be working in the restaurant, but they are very good at what they do in rescuing people.
And that's a real public service that that Jeff contributes to an ordinarily thankless public.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a peek at the card and see what we've got on the card today. The card, I start out with systemic racism, as is the usual custom, then Public Law 36-34 violations, and then evil versus the unborn. And, I think sometimes the United States is going to hell in a handbasket, but it looks like Canada's going to get there first. Then I've got speakers versus sota lie, which is it's a saying. It's something that people say, but it's also an attitude. Sota, let it go. And then I've got Doug versus the revolving door, won't versus Bell's law, and then some holdovers from earlier cards: China versus Guam, Russia versus the Ukraine, Scottish versus the rule of law, syndicalism versus capitalism, Ralph Nader versus the New York Times. So turning to Public Law 36-34, I didn't detect any violations today. I paid a little attention to a meeting that's going to be held on Friday. It's going to be a Zoom meeting, and it is a meeting of the Board of Allied Health Examiners. Now, the key word here is health, the Board of Allied Health Examiners. And item 1 on the agenda is called order. 2, proof of publication. 3, roll call. 4, election of officers. 5, adoption of agenda. 6, approval of minutes. 7, treasurer's report. 8, administrator's report. 9, a long laundry list of complaints. Starting out with GBHE CO 15-4, going all the way down to CO 22-12. Item 11 is new business, initial new applications, collaborative practice agreements. As your collaborative practice agreement applications. C, renewals. D, euthanasia technician certifications.
Wait, say that again?
Euthanasia certification. Euthanasia technician certifications.
Is that a typo?
Well, I read it and I thought, if things are moving really fast, and I know this governor, this administration doesn't value life as highly as I do. But I thought, my goodness, have we gotten here already, euthanasia? But then I went back and thought about it a little bit more and remembered that the Allied Board of Health Examiners is the governing body for all different kinds of quasi-medical professionals. Although it's medical examiners, they do dentists too. And of course, dentists are not doctors. So you can see who this is aimed at. This is veterinary medicine. Yeah, and you know that when your dog is really, on, when your dog is really on their last legs, I could have said his or hers, people will say, well, they, he's in such bad shape. I'm just going to take him to the vet and have him put to sleep. Euthanasia.
Oh, not the youth in the Western Pacific?
No. So I guess there a little bit more careful labeling might have saved me a little bit of chagrin when I got down here to the euthanasia technician certifications. And then if you're going to do it, are you going to have just a technician do it? A new storefront industry, special today, abortions and euthanasia.
2 for 1.
Yeah. All right, then we go to systemic racism. And once again, hats off to Tim and Jungle Watch. Tim really laid it out for those. If you don't understand why I keep talking about systemic racism, Jungle Watch has an excellent calendar. An excellent article titled "Attorney Williams Insists the Rice is Red." And, of course, the whole theory here is that the rice is actually orange, but the narrative is so strong that we've got to call it red rice. And if you don't call it red rice, even though you know for sure that it's not red, that it's orange, you run the risk of being canceled. You run the risk of being sociologically defenestrated. New word, Jose?
Defenestrated?
Uh-huh.
Sounds very close to euthanasia.
When someone defenestrates, it means he jumps out of a window.
Oh, it's not another word for spayed and neutered?
No. Yeah. So sociological, if you go to the fiesta and say, boy, this is good orange rice, everybody in front of you and behind you is going to say, that ain't red rice. I mean, that ain't orange rice. That's red rice. And if you insist, no, it's orange rice, you risk social defenestration. Okay, let's take a peek at the card. All right, I already took a peek at the card, didn't I? Next item on the card is evil versus the unborn. And, you know, we talk a lot on the show about abortion, and we phrase it from the standpoint of a question. And I wrote to the Daily News once, and I stated the answer first and then the question. And it goes like this. Here's the answer. Never. And here's the question. When is it okay to take the life of a helpless, innocent human? That's right. The answer is never. It's never okay. And you'll hear all kinds of sophistry and euphemisms and straw man arguments, and it's almost like a textbook in how to violate all the rules of logic coming from the other side. Well, no, that's not what it is. It's a woman's right to control her own body. So, you know, this is not just a matter of just argument. We argue about a lot of things. You know, we argue about the soundness of the dollar, deficit spending, inflation. There are a lot of things that we can argue about, and we can actually believe during the argument, we actually give the other side credit for having a reasonable, firm conviction that their argument is correct. And then we come to this whole abortion argument, and we're dealing, I think, with one of two things. We're dealing with cognitive dissonance that's so strong that people who favor abortion can't face the reality. And the other possibility is that we're just dealing with pure evil. And as an example of that kind of pure evil, I have this article that ran in LifeSite News, which, of course, I read every day. And LifeSite News article titled, "Abortionist Says Killing Over 400 People Via Euthanasia, quote, the most rewarding work we've ever done. I'd like to see what her belt looks like. Can you imagine a belt with 400 notches on it? Or maybe she doesn't notch her belt. Maybe she has something that she wears with her scrubs where she can, like you remember during World War II where they would put a flag of the Japanese flag on the fuselage of an airplane. You shoot down 5 Jap zeros, you got 5 Japanese flags. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe she's got
like a sash with a whole bunch of
coffins on it, 400 coffins. And here's the article. More than 10,000 people were killed by euthanasia in Canada in 2021. Dr. Ellen Wiebe, who has personally dispatched more than 400, is proudly contributing a significant percentage of the kill count. In fact, in a recent speech to other doctors who work in the Canadian killing fields, she bragged that she was willing to kill patients that others refused to clear for medical aid in dying. The acronym is MAID. The current euphemism for euthanasia medical aid in dying is the current euphemism for euthanasia and assisted suicide. Wiebe's work has attracted horrified coverage overseas, with the Daily Mail publishing a profile of her role in Canada's carnage. According to a long report published in New Atlantis by Alexander Rakin titled No Other Options, a suicidal man who was told he was ineligible because he had no serious illness and lacked the capacity to make informed decisions about his own personal health, was cleared by Wiebe, who flew him to Vancouver and killed him there. I want to make something really clear, Jose.
That is,
yeah. Last month I clicked over 84 years on the odometer, right? But I'll tell you this. I'm going to be absolutely 100% against euthanasia right up until the day I die.
There you go.
Where's that snare drum, Jose? That's better. Yeah. It's the most rewarding work we've ever done, Wiebe told a fellow physicians in 2020. Another euthanasia doctor, obstetrician Stephanie Green, she gets them coming and going, I guess, huh? Anything that's good for business for doctors can't be all bad, right? Stated she's ended the lives of 300 people through MAID thus far. Both the New Atlantis and the Daily Mail cited a litany of stories to which we've begun to grow accustomed. There's 41-year-old Rosina Camus, who did not have a terminal condition but was facing eviction and was short of money for food. Lonely, she decided that suicide was the best solution for all, and died by lethal injection in her basement apartment on September 26, 2021. Are you listening here, Vanessa Williams? It's a matter of cost, but there's no morality involved here. It's a matter of cost-benefit analysis. She's going to be evicted from her apartment. She doesn't have enough money for food. Well, I guess suicide is the best alternative here.
A lot of people scoff at slippery slope arguments that a lot of us make on these issues, right? And so far they prove us right.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
There you go. Yeah. A 55-year-old patient named Mary was featured in a MAID presentation. The presenter noted that she does not want to die, but she's suffering terribly and has been maxing out her credit cards.
Wow.
She has no other options.
Wow.
Gosh. So, the answer to that is more government regulation of credit card debt. That would be the solution to that problem.
Well, you know what they're going to do. They're going to say, if you can't get rid of your debt, we have another program for you.
The list seems endless. There's 68-year-old Nancy, a former doctor who ran out of money. 57-year-old Greg, a homeless writer. 38-year-old Lucy, a gender-confused immigrant suffering from chronic pain. Stephanie Green has insisted that such stories are false. You cannot access MAID in this country because you can't get housing, she said. That's clickbait. These stories have not been reported fully. Weeby, however, is supportive of suicide for those who are lonely or poor. As all Canadians have right to assisted death, people who are lonely or poor also have those rights, she told the New Atlantis. After all, right is a right. Now, in the United States, we have a Bill of Rights that lists negative rights, things that government can't do to you. But in Canada, they take a different approach, apparently. Weeby is also a big proponent of assisted suicide being available for those suffering from mental illness.
Wow.
Well, after all, if they're not going to have quality of life, what's the point?
Sounds familiar, Bob.
It does indeed. Yeah, I wonder if when she's finished here, if Lou could naturalize and run to be governor of one of the Canadian provinces. She'd fit right in.
She's going to run the hotline where people call when they're depressed and offer them tickets to Canada.
Yeah. Well, Jane Flores was quoted in the paper that for those who are having trouble getting a hold of chemical abortion, she's given them the contact information for a company in Belgium. They can get their chemical abortions there.
Kevorkian by proxy.
Exactly. What these profiles do not mention about Dr. Ellen Wiebe is that she is also an abortionist. Do I look surprised?
Shocked, I tell you.
Do I look surprised?
There's gambling going on here?
Yeah. And has dispatched patients on both ends of life spectrum at her Vancouver clinic. Now, I'm so old-fashioned in so many ways. I always thought that a lot of doctors are kind of attracted to it because they can actually save lives, right? I just never thought...
Supposed to.
Yeah. I never thought that someone who puts the caboose out in front of his shop should actually put a tombstone beside it. Yeah. We will save your life or take it. Package deal available.
She's also the Grand Führer of the Canadian Nazi Party.
Exactly. Also unmentioned is the fact that on June 29, 2017, Wiebe and a nurse sneaked into the Louis Breyer Home and Hospital. An Orthodox Jewish nursing home in Vancouver that forbids assisted suicide. Wiebe smuggled her lethal drugs and other equipment in large bags, avoided the front desk, and gave an 83-year-old man with cancer a lethal injection in his room on his request. That sounds like Murder One to me, Jose.
I was just being sarcastic about the Nazi reference, but this is exactly what they did in 1940.
Exactly.
The quality of life, get rid of the citizens they deem unqualified to be here on Earth.
Yep.
And she's getting away with it.
They started out with the mentally retarded, the physically handicapped, etc. Got the people used to the idea that we do this measurement and that society's better off if some people were dead. And it was an easy jump from there to the Holocaust. Well, it looks like Wiebe wanted to start a mini Holocaust in Vancouver. Wiebe, let's see. An uproar broke out when this was discovered. The residence is the home of many Holocaust survivors who understandably found this event traumatizing. End of article. You would have thought, of course, it is Canada, and in some respects, you know, they've really gone way over the ledge, way over the edge. They've got a president there who's not an old geezer like ours, and probably knows what day it is, and probably knows where he is, and probably knows that he's the premier of Canada. But what a whack job he is! They chip off the old block. Okay, next on the card is Speaker versus Sota Lie. Let's take a short break here and we'll come back to speakers.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Guam Community College Spring 2023 late registration starts Monday, January 9th through Friday, January 13th. New students can apply at guamcc.edu/apply or in person at GCC. Returning students can register, add, or drop classes using their MyGCC login. Register or apply now, online or on campus at Building 2000 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., January 9th till the 13th. Stop thinking about getting back into the classroom and just do it.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, I took a peek at Facebook here, and I got a post here from Bonnie Suba. Jose Ted Pago Jr., just remember, when you die, you have to pay death taxes, too. Well, this is an interesting question that I have addressed on Tall Tales, and I wrote a column, an op-ed for the Post called Confessions of a Third-Class Citizen. I think you remember that, Jose. And there's a real irony when it comes to death taxes. First of all, the territory of Guam does not levy death taxes. Yet. The United States government does levy death taxes on the states that reach a certain proportion. Right now, it's high. It's like around $8 million. Not anything probably that most tailgaters got to worry about. But we do have a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president. If the Democrats take control of the whole Congress again, you could probably bet on the threshold down around $100. But the rule on death taxes is this: that if you were born in any one of the 50 states, your estate, if it reaches the threshold, has to pay death taxes on all of your assets, no matter where they're located, anywhere in the world. However, if you were born on Guam, you don't have to pay death taxes on any of your assets located anywhere in the world except the 50 states. So if you bought the King Ranch in Texas, and you were born in Guam, you'd have to pay death taxes on that. But if you owned a equal size hacienda in Mexico, you would not have to. You wouldn't have to pay. You wouldn't have to pay death taxes in any case because you'd be dead. But your heirs would not have to pay death taxes on it because a quirk in the law, citizens born on Guam don't have to pay taxes on, there's no death tax levied on the states of people born in Guam for their worldwide assets except those located in the 50 states. Just a little interesting footnote here.
I was born in California.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I have a feeling it might not exist by the time I die. Does it apply anymore to me? if California goes into the sea.
Would you kind of default back to Guam? Seems fair, doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah,
it does seem fair. Okay, next item on the card: speakers versus sota lie. Sota means let it go. Don't make an issue of it. Sota lie. Hey, let it go, boy. And it's an attitude. And this is another Jungle Watch has really been ambitious lately, hasn't it? Cranking out some really good stuff. If you don't go to Jungle Watch, you're missing out. It's Jungle Watch, one word, junglewatch.info. There's a really lot of good information there. And here's the latest one. In the video in a news story, attorney Ed Caldy breaks into a passionate speech about those who came forward and how we all got a huge gift from them for doing that. A typical lawyer speech, especially one who is walking away with millions regardless of the outcome. But beyond that, who exactly came forward? Now, we're talking about Ed Caldy, who is one of the attorneys in a bankruptcy case. I think he's an attorney for the Creditors Committee. That's the bankruptcy of the Archdiocese of Agana, which took voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy because of the sex scandal brought upon during the reign of Tony Apparon, where literally hundreds of priests were accused of sexually molesting post-pubescent boys. and so that's who we're talking about. And then back to the column, who exactly came forward other than Leo Tadella, Roy Quintanilla, Walter Denton, Roland Sandia, and Doris Conception for her deceased son? Every one of the hundreds of other survivors, save one or two, have hidden behind their initials instead of putting their names and faces out there like the brave few just named. It was only the aforementioned brave few who publicly testified in favor of the bill that eventually gave the hundreds of other survivors the opportunity to sue the Archdiocese for damages. If there's going to be, quote, justice, if anything is left after the attorneys are done, then real justice should disproportionately compensate the very few who actually did come forward and did not cower behind an attorney or their initials in court filings. Now, I'll never forget the day that Walter Dent, excuse me, it was not Walter, it was Roy Quintanilla held a press conference at the driveway up to the Chancery. Standing beside him was David Lujan. Standing there, I characterized David Lujan as a reiteration of a cigar store Indian. Have you ever seen a cigar store Indian, Jose?
Just a wooden statue outside the store.
Yeah. And that used to be a pretty popular metaphor for someone who stood mute in a particular activity. Yeah, I saw him there, man, stand there like a cigar store Indian. And that's all David Lujan did. But that's all David Lujan has to do. You talk about the power of appearances. So Roland laid it out. I mean,
Roy
really laid it out. And that was the first, as they say, the first olive out of the jug. Once you get the first olive out, the rest come out a lot easier, right? The first few who actually did come forward came forward without an attorney and without a law to protect them from the wrath of Apparon and his goblins. Now, I mentioned that David stood there. David did not represent Roy at the time. He He was just doing a cameo. Yeah. And here's an example of Aperon and the Goblins' counterattack. Tim Rohr and his associates launched a vicious and calumnious attack on the Archbishop and the Church. The perpetrators of these calumnies have resorted to insults and violence, revealing their true intention to destroy the Catholic Church and discredit the Archbishop by whatever means. Their method is to confuse and mislead the faithful, even to the point of inducing some to bring false testimony. This was predicted even before the first accusation was leveled. Those who are orchestrating this campaign are inciting people into hatred of the Archbishop and the Catholic Church. They have produced scandal, confusion, and grave errors with a cruel intent to injure the Archbishop, the Catholic Church in Guam, and many other people of goodwill who have been outraged and harassed. Therefore, the Archdiocese of Agana is in the process of taking canonical and legal measures against those perpetrating these malicious lies.
Never happened.
Yeah. And then the column goes on to say, and let's not forget the late John Tovis, who was and is still the real hero here. It was John Tovis who first pointed a public finger at Aperon. It was John Tovis who first marched on Fortress Aperon on San Ramon Hill. And it was John Tovis who was first thrown off that hill by Aperon's goblin-in-chief, the now disgraced and defrocked runaway, the former Father Adrian Cristobal. We remember that.
Who's still MIA to today.
Exactly, yeah. Tovis died without receiving a single cent for his courage. And Doris Conception, for her deceased son, Sonny Kanata, every one of the hundreds of other survivors, save one or two others, have hidden behind their initials instead of putting their names and faces out there like the brave few. Let me go on to the next page here. So let us see some real justice. Let's see to it that the survivors who put their real names and faces out there when there was not only no hope of compensation, but the full expectation that they would be sued into poverty and oblivion by the filthy machine, including the New Jersey Mafia, that would be the Generinis, who protected Aperon and sought to crush anyone and everyone who stood up to the, quote, filth in the church. Here's a quote from Benedict XVI. How much filth there is in the church, even among those in the priesthood, should belong entirely to him, meaning God. How much pride, how much self-sufficiency. And now let's speak of others who came forward. How about the Catholics who spent 54 Sundays marching in front of the Acania Cathedral during the 9:30 Mass, Aperon's Mass? Yes, what about them? What about the sneers and the hate from the fellow Catholics, ? Who intentionally and brazenly pushed their marchers' picket line Sunday and after Sunday, who entered the once hallowed halls of the Agana Cathedral and presented themselves for Holy Communion with nary a thought to the filth that was perpetrated from that same altar. Yeah, I remember one time one of the Catholic ladies groups arrived in a bus, and one of the elderly ladies, as she has to sort of merge in with a picket line to get up to the door of the cathedral, says in a loud voice, "Go ahead and picket. Just stay out of our way." Yeah.
As she got in the way.
Yeah. And what about the many Catholics who testified in support of the bill to lift the civil statute of limitations so that survivors could finally seek justice? even though those same Catholics knew that they would have to pay the bill because the actual perpetrators would never be required to pay a single cent? Yes, what about them? Settle this and give whatever is left to the real survivors who dared put their names and faces up against the monsters of San Ramon when they had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Now, I call this speakers versus Sota lie because as we got into the whole scandal, it became pretty clear that an awful lot of people knew about this. And it was one of those, well, you know, I kind of knew about it, but I didn't want to say anything. You know? So when you come down to it, oftentimes what we're really dealing with here is comfort. You know, I knew what was going on there was wrong, but if I had spoken up, I might have been uncomfortable somehow. So, well, you know what it's like.
That was the confession of Dora's conception, because for years she did not believe her son, and she regretted that every single day after she came out. Well, she regretted it up until the time she was able to come out and tell everybody what her son told and how it was corroborated with all the other victims.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is something liberating people about stop looking the other way. And there's something liberating about finally coming to terms with what is happening here on Guam.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as we were discussing yesterday, when it comes to abortion, we forgot the lessons that we learned during the what I refer to as the wars of bishop succession. Historically, there was a war of Spanish succession and a war of Austrian succession. We've added our own, the war of bishop succession. Okay, next on the card is Doug versus the revolving door. And Doug, spelled D-U-G, of course, is our new Attorney General, Doug Moylan, who replaced the former Attorney General whose name used to be Leaving in January. I guess he's got to change it now to Left in January. And I can't say that it happened soon enough to make me happen, but it finally happened. And this is a story that ran in the Post. AG's new charging practice faces resistance from judge. A Superior Court of Guam judge said he would not be considering supplemental documents when making a decision to release defendants after they've been charged with crimes. Attorney General Douglas Moylan's first week as the island's sixth elected chief legal officer has seen changes in how prosecutors argue for defendants. Confinement or release in their first hearing after being charged, now submitting requests for pretrial confinement and providing statements for victims if possible. Now, he said he was going to do this before he was sworn in. He provides statements from the victims of the crimes these people were accused of, and a request for personal confinement, a written request for personal confinement, pretrial confinement, as I recall, supplemented by the rap sheet of the person coming before the court. Now, turn on the law and order chime here, Jose. We have, in the United States Constitution, the Supreme Court has declared that anyone who is arrested and popped into the pokey must be brought before a judge or a magistrate within 48 hours of his incarceration, even if it happens to be on a Sunday or a holiday. And the magistrate has to determine whether there was probable cause to arrest that person. No probable cause, got to turn him loose. And Repeat told us that in 1 week there were 3 different defendants that were released because the magistrate said, I looked at your papers, there's no probable cause here. Show this gentleman to the door. So that's the first item of business at a magistrate hearing. Second item of business is if there is probable cause, then what do we do with the defendant between now and his trial? And the constitutional law is that the two things that must factor into the judge's decision are the likelihood that the defendant will turn up for trial and the danger to the community if the defendant is released. Our law, the constructional preference of our law, favors release on recognizance. And if a judge doesn't release a defendant on recognizance, he has to do a written statement as to why he's not being released. And he has to include, there's several factors he needs to include. Now, up until Doug Moylan came along, there would be an affidavit from a deputy attorney, an assistant attorney general who is a prosecutor, incorporating a police report. And that was pretty much it. That would the judge would look at that, maybe ask a question or two. The public defender would make an argument. The assistant attorney general would make an argument, and the judge would rule. It could be a cash bail. It could be a requirement for a third-party custodian, ankle bracelets, whatever. And that would be the destiny of the defendant. Now, defense counsel was always able to make a motion to the court to change the conditions of release if necessary, if he had a good argument or if they had a good argument. So what Doug Moylan has instituted is, it seems to me it makes the judge's life easier if he's got these documents in front of him that lay out some of the things that the judge needs if he has to do the write-up because he's not going to release on recognizance. And of course, one of the Doug's campaign planks in his platform was no more catch and release. And we saw it over and over again where a defendant would be arrested for a crime, brought before the magistrate, released on his own recognizance, and commit another crime within the same day. And the defendant would already be on release for an earlier crime. And I think there was a certain degree of public outrage about this, and Doug took great issue with this, and that was perhaps one of the reasons he's the Attorney General now, instead of leaving on a jet plane. Okay, let's take a short break here. Let's see who I got lining up in the green room. I'm not surprised. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Repeat, I'm going to finish up with this, and it may take me through the halftime show, but I really want to give you enough time to lay out your case. So you may want to hang on until after the halftime show.
Happy holidays, Guam. From now through January 13th, the Guam Visitors Bureau is giving... Happy holidays, Guam. From now through January 13th, the Guam Visitors Bureau is giving you a chance to win $150 in cash just by sharing your Christmas spirit. Each week, GVB will announce the theme of the week, so take your best photo or video and upload to visitguam.com/Instaguam to enter for a chance to win $150 in cash. Winners will be announced every Friday. Brought to you by GVB, making Guam a better place to celebrate the season of giving.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
They want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Okay, so continuing on here, I haven't done that much criminal law, handled some criminal cases as a judge, and of course there were times when I was the ex parte judge and had to do we didn't have magistrates in those days. I had to do what are now magistrate hearings, occasionally having to go to work on a Saturday. So I'm somewhat familiar with the process. I wouldn't hold myself out as an expert on it, like I am an expert on most everything else. Surprise, surprise. Right, Jose? Yeah, I'm still very proud of my humility, Jose. So this seems to me like a really good idea that Doug has in order to give the judge as much information as he wants. Now, the fact that papers are submitted, I suppose the judge doesn't even have to read them. But it would seem to me be of great assistance to a judge. And when I first read this and Cezanne's kind of angry reaction to it, that he didn't want it, and of course I can understand why the public defenders don't want it. That's their job. No surprise. But then it occurred to me, if these papers are submitted to the court and the judge releases the defendant too easily, say on ROR, release on recognizance, and that same guy or same lady goes out and commits another crime, here's a written record available to the media. And they can look at that and say, yeah, the judge let this guy go when he's got a rap sheet longer than Bob Klitzkie's arm? What in the world was he thinking of? So, and I'm only speculating here. Maybe Benjamin Cezanne is thinking, I don't want to have these papers out floating around so that people can second guess my decisions. Now, magistrates don't go up for that retention election every year like judges do. Magistrates are appointed for a 4-year term. They can succeed themselves once and they're chosen by the Chief Justice. But bad press doesn't help anybody in public life, certainly not judges. So maybe Cezanne has a sort of a self-defense mechanism that kicked in here when he said, I don't need no stinking papers from you. Now, let me go back and dig into this article again here. The first week has also seen some pushback from defense attorneys. Assistant Alternative Public Defender Pete Santos said that anyone who is going to speak on behalf of on behalf of the government should just say what he's going to say, and if it's worth saying, he'd better say it twice, otherwise just shut up. In other words, if you can't repeat it, it's probably not important enough to say, right? Pete Santos. He objected to the court. The first week, however, also has seen pushback from defense attorneys, some of whom, when objecting in court hearings, called the documents a, quote, boilerplate manifesto, a horrible document, and campaign rhetoric in public relations because they did not contain accurate information. Over the weekend, Magistrate Judge Benjamin Cezanne, who has been the judge in all of the initial hearings, told prosecutors he would not be considering the documents and for the attorneys to orally argue for the release or confinement of the defendant. Now, that's just kind of backwards the way it ordinarily is, Ordinarily, if you want to communicate with a judge, you put it in writing, file a motion, file papers, file a memorandum, whatever. And here's a quote. There were a lot of misrepresentations that were presented to the court. Also, there were some inconsistencies with respect to the victim's statements, Cezanne repeated Tuesday afternoon. In response, former Chief Prosecutor Basil O'Malley said he would be putting into writing a request to reconsider the decision. All right, I'm going to wrap this up right after the big halftime show. Stay tuned for Rogues Gallery. Look for your picture there when it comes up.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Speaking publicly about the documents, I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News.
People know I take classified documents and classified information seriously.
President Biden at a summit in Mexico City Tuesday. He's talking for the first time publicly about those possibly classified documents found in his former office. Republicans, including Speaker Kevin McCarthy, are upset that it took the White House more than 2 months to reveal the documents had been found. He tells Fox News,
"They've gotten away with so much for so long. This was discovered before the last election, just like the laptop. They think they can lie to the American public. They think they can control the media, control companies to shut down if one media company writes about it. They think they're above the law."
Attorney General Merrick Garland has tapped U.S. Attorney John Lausch, a Trump appointee, to review the matter. President Biden arrived back in Washington just after midnight from the Leaders Summit in Mexico City. Federal charges filed against the suspect in the machete attack in New York's Times Square.
The Department of Justice says Trevor Thomas Bickford has been charged with attempting to kill officers, U.S. government officials, and those assisting them, accused of attacking 3 New York City police officers with a large knife on New Year's Eve. Officials shooting the teen in the shoulder after he allegedly shouted Allahu Akbar before charging at officers working with the FBI near Times Square. Bickford, who also faces state charges, including attempted murder, remains in custody and will be transported to face federal charges filed in the Southern District of New York.
Fox's Kristen Goodwin. And the Mega Millions jackpot did it again. It outfoxed the millions of players. No one won Tuesday night's drawing, so Friday's grand prize is worth an estimated $1.35 billion. America's listening to Fox News.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Millions of people in California remain under flood warnings, with more than 160,000 without power and at least 17 dead. This after a string of 6 atmospheric river storms has racked the state, and forecasters say at least 3 more storms are expected by next Wednesday. In Illinois, a controversial clemency hearing for a convicted murderer.
Robert Turner was sentenced to death for the 1985 rape and murder of suburban Chicago teen 16-year-old Bridget Drobny in downstate Macoupin County, Illinois, a death sentence that was commuted in 2003, though now a reform group called the Illinois Prison Project appears before the Illinois Prisoner Review Board asking that Turner be freed. They say because he's a model inmate and a changed man.
Why would they do that?
The victim's family not buying it.
That innate evil, the things that he did to my sister, that doesn't change.
He needs to give penance for the crime that he committed. Walking free is not bad.
The Macoupin County State's attorney also in court to object to Turner's clemency petition. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The Golden Globes trying to make a comeback after years of criticism and scandal. Stars turned out for the awards ceremony Tuesday night in Los Angeles,
with Ryan Murphy accepting the Carol Burnett Award, while Eddie Murphy received the Cecil B. DeMille Award. Sean Penn introduced Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky for a sobering moment, while Jennifer Coolidge thanked the White Lotus creator Mike White in her acceptance speech.
You sort of changed my life in a million different ways, and my neighbors are speaking to me, things like that.
Michelle Polino, Fox News.
The show was broadcast on NBC. One actor who could not be there, the star of Yellowstone, Kevin Costner, says the floods in L.A. prevented him from attending. And stocks closed higher after Fed Chairman Powell said the central bank remains strongly committed to lowering inflation. The Dow up 186 points. I'm Carmen Roberts. This is Fox News.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dedido, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Guam Community College Spring 2023 late registration starts Monday, January 9th through Friday, January 13th. New students can apply at guamcc.edu/apply or in person at GCC. Returning students can register, add, or drop classes using their MyGCC login. Register or apply now, online or on campus at Building 2000 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., January 9th till the 13th. Stop thinking about getting back into the classroom and just do it.
Happy holidays, Guam. From now through January 13th, the Guam Visitors Bureau is giving you a chance to win $150 in cash just by sharing your Christmas spirit. Each week, GVB will announce the theme of the week, so take your best photo or video and upload to visitguam.com/Instaguam to enter for a chance to win $150 in cash. Winners will be announced every Friday. Brought to you by GVB, making Guam a better place to celebrate the season of giving.
Jose, that's a group of handsome people.
Indeed.
It certainly is. And there may be some people out there in our international radio listening audience who are curious as to how they could have their picture in the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery. Could you explain it one more time?
Sure thing, Bob. For those who are viewing the live streams, the links are in the comments on both youtube.com and on Facebook. And if you want to, point your browser to thepoint.gu, the official website of this radio station. There you'll find a picture of the T-shirt with the beard. Click on that link. It'll bring you to the purveyor. Or your shirt. When it arrives, put the shirt on, take a selfie in your shirt, and send it to the Points WhatsApp at 671-797-8255. And they, too, will be added to the Rogues Gallery.
And what a wonderful treat that is. And talk about bragging rights. Wow. Okay, I'm going to finish up this article here dealing with Moylan versus the revolving door. And then I'm going to give a little time to Pete Santos.
Going to do what?
I'm going to give a little time to Pete Santos.
Got it.
I'm going to have a special talking rule, though. He can only say his rap once. He can't repeat it. Okay. In response, former Chief Prosecutor Basil O'Malley said he would be putting into writing a request to reconsider the decision. We do believe it's a statutory requirement that allows us to do so. It's a violation of our separation of powers under the Crime Victims' Bill of Rights, said O'Malley, who admitted to errors but said they were being cleaned up. CSUN, in response, said he would set a hearing date upon receiving the motion. O'Malley's motion is related to the case of Eileen John, who was charged in connection to stealing a car and resisting arrest. However, once CSUN set a hearing for the motion, defense attorneys present on Zoom at the time asked if they could be present to argue whether the judge's order and subsequent motion would be for all cases. Moylan then told the Daily Post he's hoping CSUN's order could be put into writing so the AG's office can analyze the decision and go from there. He may have been talking about a particular case, said Moylan, who doesn't believe judges have the authority to strike these types of documents. Victims have a right to be heard at those hearings. They have a right to be heard, and we've given them a voice as per the legislative mandate, added Moylan. In response to what he called hemming and hawing by defense attorneys, Moylan made a similar argument and added the prosecution is well within its rights to use the documents to ask for a defendant's confinement. So there you got it, Doug Moylan versus the revolving door. And now, without further ado, I go to an alternate public defender, Pete Santos, who is probably expressing the official position of the alternate public defender. Right, Pete?
Well, if we follow your theory that when someone holds a position, they cannot have a personal opinion, then yeah, I guess.
Well, it's good. It's good that you're an orthodox tailgater. Repeat.
Right. So, with this whole, hoopla about this what's going on. First, I agree with the premise that more information is better than less. You did a very, very good summation of what happens at the Maggies, except I would add that it's probation that is responsible for providing the history and the risk assessment of a person.
I've got to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you there for just a second. It's pre-trial services that provides the information. Probation doesn't come into play until after someone is convicted.
Right, but it's probation officers that are doing it. It's under pretrial services.
Yeah.
They do have a pretrial division, but
well,
anyway,
let's be precise. Go ahead.
Okay, so with at least what I've seen so far, there are a couple of victims that actually have come forward and said, we do want him released and we oppose confinement. So, you have to take the good with the bad. It's an assumption to think that all victims want the defenders released. Now, the problem with the way I see it, the problem that the judge had with the supplemental information is not just the fact that they were providing supplemental information, but when the defense attorney was doing their job and questioning the supplemental information, it was found that a lot of it was very inaccurate. So what this document is, there's a template that was created, and for every defendant, they're using the template, but they're copying and pasting over the last template that was used, and they're not being very careful in taking out the information that was pertaining to the prior defendant, and it's still in the document. So, in other words, this thing is something that sounds good in theory, but in practice, it needs a little work. They need to be a little bit more diligent in the execution of it. It's a great, I believe adding supplemental information is good for the process. When I was a military magistrate, we weren't allowed to make the decisions without evidence. So in the military world, you actually have to have this supplemental information. It would be considered arbitrary and capricious for a magistrate to make a decision based on not a lack of information or very little information. So I agree with the premise that more information is better, but the judge was only pushing back because case after case after case, we were finding that the information was erroneous. And so his point is, do a better job at presenting this supplemental information, or else I am not going to consider it anymore.
Well,
until you guys can do better.
I'm glad you're clarifying here, Pete, because we're really talking about two almost totally different things. The first thing we're talking about is, as you say it, as a general principle, more information is better than less information. but you know the incredibly high standard for accuracy that we maintain here on Tall Tales. So I would be the last person to say, well, just submit it, and if it's not accurate, sota prim. Yeah, so I think we're kind of in agreement on this one, Pete.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that even before this, there have been many, many, many cases where prosecution would actually recommend release, and it was the judge who said, "Nah, I'm not letting you go." You know, I have my reasons, and that's their job. They're the gatekeeper. The court is the gatekeeper, and so they're the gatekeeper of what information can and shouldn't be considered, and they're the gatekeeper of, in the case of the magistrate, you know, who's gonna be released and who's not gonna be released.
Well, I'm going to rule on this one, Pete. I think you've pretty much told me everything you wanted to say, right?
Sure, unless you want me to repeat.
Yeah, and that is that Moylan's submitting this, taking this new tack of submitting more information is a good idea. Submitting inaccurate information is never a good idea. That's my ruling. Jose?
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. And of course, being the highest court on Tall Tales, I'll repeat former Justice Robert Jackson's saying about the infallibility of the Supreme Court. Justice Jackson said, "We are not final because we're infallible. We're infallible because we're final." And that's the case with the Supreme Court here in Tall Tales. So thanks a lot for calling. Repeat.
All right.
See you later. Yeah, okay. So he shed a little light on the subject, didn't he? Yeah. So copy, you know, the advent of the word processor, it has given people the ability to do things that I never thought would be possible. You know, I took high school typing, Jose, and I got up to 30 words a minute and 30 errors a page. And for me, just to type a letter, you know, was probably about 2 ounces of whiteout. It was just almost an impossibility. But with word processors, anybody can sit down and crank out a letter post haste.
That cut and paste thing that's really I can't think of the word. Not just irresponsible. It's almost like you're not paying attention to your case.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kind of got the feeling that there was some cutting and pasting, and there was a failure to delete what was on that document before. But they should be able to crank these things out rather easily with word processors, and cut and paste is a real assistance for lawyers when you want to put portions of a statute or something like that in your papers instead of turning it into a typing exercise. So I'm looking for nothing but good coming out of Doug Moylan's initiative, and since I've ruled on it, I'm backing it 100%. All right, let's go next to Bell's Law, and it's Won't Parkinson versus Bell's Law. Just for clarification, Bell's Law is Public Law 20-134 that was passed in 1990, and you remember that Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973. So when Bell's Law, which was an extremely stringent anti-abortion law, when it was passed, Roe versus Wade was already on the books, and the ink was hardly dry on the governor's signature when he signed Bell's Law, signed that bill into law. When Janet Bensouff from the American Civil Liberties Union arrived on island to challenge the law. And what happened was there's a portion of Bell's Law that said that it's a crime to aid in an abortion by telling where one could get an abortion. So there's a First Amendment dimension there. So Benchoff did that, was arrested. The case went before the district court. The district court ruled that Bell's law was unconstitutional and enjoined the enforcement of Bell's law. Now, a little backstory here. This was a time when Elizabeth Barrett Anderson was the Attorney General for Guam. She was the appointed Attorney General. We didn't elect our Attorneys General in those days. And my recollection was that, I don't know exactly the correct word, but the arrest of Benchoff on that particular issue was the fastest way to get the matter before the court. And Elizabeth Barrett Anderson more than likely was operating on the premise that Bell's law was facially unconstitutional. Now, law and order, Jose, when a statute is facially unconstitutional, that means you read it, you say this is there's no way that this statute could be enforced. Now, sometimes statutes are not facially unconstitutional. The unconstitutionality comes up in a particular way of enforcing. So it's obviously a lot easier to get an injunction against a statute that's facially unconstitutional than one that's not. So she was arrested, and the thing moved very, very quickly. Now, the reason that I say that this was probably an easy setup to get the matter before the court as quickly as possible is because after the court entered the injunction forbidding the enforcement of Bell's law, Governor Joe Atta at the time wanted to take appeal of that decision. And under the setup at that time, it was his call. His Attorney General, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, would not take the matter to the Ninth Circuit. So Joe Atta had to hire counsel to do it. He hired Kathy Merriman to do it. And I suspect that, that there may have been some communication between Benchoff and Anderson to get Benchoff arrested so that there would be a case or controversy to take to the district court. So the case went to the Ninth Circuit, and of course at the Ninth Circuit, the Ninth Circuit sustained the District Court of Guam. The injunction remains in play, and it still prohibits the enforcement of Bell's law. Although the underlying Supreme Court case, Roe versus Wade, has been overridden by the Dobbs versus the reproductive rights folks in Texas. So there would be no constitutional impediment to the enforcement of Bell's law. Now, on the speech part, maybe that's questionable. But as a general proposition, unconstitutional provisions in a statute can be severed if the major function of the statute remains in place, and if the court can be convinced that the legislature would have enacted that statute even absent the severed portion. Now here, we get so carried away with severability clauses, even a one section statute will have a second statute, the severability clause. So whether or not it's in the bill, the severability lives in the hands of judges. So Bell's law was never repealed after the injunction was issued, so it's still on the books. And I wrote a column not too long ago stating that even though it was constitutionally infirm, it is a good statement of the public policy of this territory because it was enacted by the legislature and signed into law by the government. That's how we know what public policy is. It's not what the court said it is. So Doug Moylan, in his campaign, said, I'm the Attorney General. I'm elected. My statutory, my organic legislation is different than the old appointed Attorney General. I'm a defendant in this case. I am going to move the district court to dissolve that injunction, and I'm going to enforce Bell's law unless the legislature changes it. And Moylan made it clear he's not doing this on some sort of moral or philosophical basis, strictly on the basis of, I'm the Attorney General. Attorneys General defend the statutes of their state. And a couple days ago, he said that he'd be moving the district court in about 30 days to do that. So that's where we stand on that. Now, the next item on the card here is Won't Parkinson versus Bell's Law. And this is an article that ran in the Post today. And the article is entitled, Parkinson, Repeal 1990 Local Abortion Ban. And it goes like this. Senator William Parkinson, also known as Will Parkinson, better known as Won't Parkinson, is expected to hold a press conference Thursday regarding the issue of abortion access. So he's pretty good at holding press conferences. He didn't even need to wait to get to he was sworn in to hold his first press conference. Parkinson, who had campaigned on championing abortion rights, told the Guam Daily Post he's leaning toward a repeal of the 1990 abortion ban, sometimes referred to as the Bell-Areola Law, after its main sponsor, the late Elizabeth Areola. Last year, the Supreme Court unsettled the legal landscape surrounding abortion by overturning decades-old case law protecting the practice, allowing states and territories to regulate abortion as they see fit. Now, what this is really about is criminal law. When Roe came along, most states criminalized abortion. Committing an abortion was a crime. And, of course, the whole doctrine of accessories and aiders and abettors came along with that. So states had the ability to criminalize abortion before Roe versus Wade came along. The state in Texas, committing an abortion was a crime. And the lady who later on became, who had the nom de judiciaire, Jane Roe, was pregnant and wanted to have an abortion. She hired a couple of rookie attorneys to litigate for her. She never got her abortion. She had the baby. The baby grew up. The baby has actually come forward and made some statements of her own. But when the case got to the United States Supreme Court, 7 justices held that to make crime of abortion during the first 3 months of pregnancy was unconstitutional. And they came up with ironclad reasoning for their decision. You know, when the Supreme Court makes a decision, they'll write an opinion, and in their opinion, they'll say, this is why we decided the way we did. And in that opinion, they'll cite sections of the Constitution, statutes, prior decisions of their own, etc., and they will, in laying these things out, attempt to be convincing so that the person who read the decision said, yeah, that decision is right. That didn't happen with Roe versus Wade. Even pro-abortion people said it's one of the worst Supreme Court decisions of all time. And the decision bottomed on a woman's right to privacy. And a woman's right to privacy, you won't find the word privacy in the United States Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Do a search, it's not there. And the right to privacy first saw the light of day in a case called Griswold versus Connecticut. Connecticut had a statute that criminalized birth control, married people using birth control. And Griswold was a doctor and a professor in one of the universities back there, and they figured out a way. It was kind of like our local decision here. They conducted themselves in such a manner that they would be arrested and prosecuted and take the matter up to the Supreme Court. And that was the case called Griswold versus Connecticut. Now, an earlier case called Poe versus Ullman, the same thing happened, and the case got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, we're not going to decide this. We found that this statute has been on the books ever since, and there hasn't been a prosecution for the last 40 years. So there's no real case or controversy here. Get out of my face, is what the Supreme Court said. So the plaintiff in Griswold had to do some real good lawyering to violate the law in such a manner, and perhaps with the collusion of state officials, so that there would be a case or controversy. So when Griswold versus Connecticut got to the United States Supreme Court, Mr. Justice Douglas said, there is no commitment to a right to privacy in the Constitution, but it's there. And it's there in the emanations and penumbras of the Bill of Rights. Penumbra is a word, I mean, I use that word almost every day. It's just such a common word. but a penumbra is the shadow of an object. So when the sun shines on an object, it will create a shadow. And if the shadow goes beyond the perimeter of the sun, that would be a penumbra. That's a real good word to base an important Supreme Court decision on, right, Jose? So Douglas said, we got the Fourth Amendment, that's search and seizure, and the First Amendment. In the penumbras of all of these amendments, you will find a right to privacy. And this is part of our substantive due process. Therefore, the Connecticut statute is unconstitutional. In another case, maybe 2 years later, Eisenstedt versus Baird, the Supreme Court said, same thing for people that aren't married. If married people can use contraceptives, it would be a denial of equal protection if unmarried people can't use contraceptives. So you see how the Supreme Court has great ability to just make things up. And that's why from time to time, I'm really unmerciful on the Supreme Court, even with its conservative majority. There's a term, critarchy, which means rule by judges. And what we have here, our Supreme Court, although we call it a court, really isn't a court, because a court has to make its decision in accordance with some higher level of power. And there's no higher level of power than the Supreme Court. They could tell you in 1973 that states cannot criminalize abortion. That's what the Constitution says. And then they can come along in 2021 and say, well, actually states can criminalize abortion. So even their own earlier decisions are not the rules that they have to comply with. They can rule any state statute unconstitutional, any act of Congress unconstitutional, and they do it. And they do it with carefree abandon. Now, a lot of times I favor the result, but I don't favor the way they got to the result. Bush versus Gore being the classic example. And people say, George Bush should never have been elected in the year 2000 because he never got a majority of the votes. My answer is yes, he did get a majority of the votes. He got 5, and Gore only got 4. That's a majority. The Supreme Court should have never gotten involved with that case. They should have said they don't have jurisdiction. We do that at the joint session of Congress. All right, let me take a short break here. We'll head for for Wrigley Field. We'll come back to Won't Parkinson.
All three stations, all three morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best. Choice Broadcasting has swept the top three best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top three radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizava. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
So here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, world's most beautiful ballpark. I got two more innings to wrap up another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. I peeked at the Facebook here during the break, and Colin Clark came up with one of my favorite lines from the movies. If you remember Strother Martin as the warden in charge of the work camp where Paul Newman was sent to prison. And after they'd beaten the snot out of Paul Newman and he's lying in this trench, Strother stumbles up to the top of a trench, kind of hitches up his trousers a little bit and says, "Vince, what we have here is failure to communicate." I never had the opportunity to use that line when I was director of corrections because we never beat people up out there, but it was always right on the tip of my tongue, Jose. Okay, so I was talking about abortion, Eisenstedt versus Baird, etc. So we went from this cockeyed decision called Griswold versus Connecticut. And that's how we got to the point where Henry could marry Herman because of a right to privacy and the right to abortion, etc. And then in Dobbs, the majority decision said, no, there is no right to privacy with respect to this because we're talking about taking the life of an unborn human. And my favorite justice, Mr. Justice Clarence Thomas, chimed in and said, yeah, we need to take a look at the other cases that were decided on the basis of substantive due process, this made-it-up doctrine that gave us Griswold versus Connecticut and ultimately Roe versus Wade. Of course, he was roundly criticized for that. But so now we're at a situation where states have the ability to criminalize abortion, legislature, governor, etc. And we have a criminal statute on the books. Now, our Attorney General, not long after Dobbs came out, said, well, Bell's law is not good law. It was unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional because at the time it was enacted, the Constitution prohibited such law. And so, therefore, Bell's law is void ab initio from the beginning. And something that's void ab initio cannot be ratified or redone or whatever. It's just there. It's over. That's the standard meaning of void ab initio. And I thought it looked to me like Levin looked until he found the answer that he wanted, and the answer was too good to do any more research. So I sat down on my word processor and typed in the words unconstitutional statute in the search bar. And the first hit I got, the very first one, was an antique Indiana Law School law review that said that, that talked about void ab initio, et cetera, laid it all out, 3 or 4 pages of cases that so held. But then the author said, but, something different happens when the court removes the judicial infirmity. And he said, strange as it may seem, a statute that's void ab initio is resurrected, and that's the word he used, resurrected, when the constitutional infirmity is removed by the appellate court that put it in place. And he said, this is the rule in Indiana. So I wrote a column in the Pacific Island Times about that. You could look it up if you so desired. And I pointed out that maybe that was the rule in Indiana maybe 100 years ago. But ordinarily, the older a judicial precedent is, the stronger it is. Because the Supreme Court, when it's dealing with a stare decisis, would rather reverse itself after in a short period of time after the wrong decision, because there's less reliance interest on it. But anyhow, that was the Indiana rule, and I pointed out that we're closer to India and Indonesia than we are in Indiana. But still, why didn't Levin distinguish the Indiana rule? Why didn't he mention it and say it doesn't apply? And the answer, once again, is it isn't what Levin did. It's what Levin didn't do. Yeah. He looked until he found what he wanted, and then he stopped looking. And therefore, he didn't make a move to dissolve Bell's law. Now, my analysis was that even if there was case law that went along with Levin, if he could get past Rule 11 of the Rules of Civil Procedure and make a good faith argument that the injunction should be dissolved, it was his responsibility to do that. And if the court said, no, the injunction remains in place because it's constitutionally infirm, he would have done his job. But he didn't do his job. It looked to me like he just acted on his own personal preference. And Doug's not doing that. Doug says, I'm the Attorney General of Guam. I'm not going to get into whether abortion's a good or bad thing. I'm the Attorney General. It's my duty to enforce the statute of my jurisdictions. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And it makes a whole lot of sense if you stop to think about it. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs, and we'll come back to Won't Parkinson, Jose.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup,
including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific.
We want to be your partner.
Equal opportunity lender. Member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
Wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year from your friends at Security Title. As we clean house for the new year, this is an excellent time to make sure the title to your land is also in order. It doesn't matter if you own a ranch in Inarajan, a house in Dededo, or a hotel in Tumon. Keeping the ownership clear promotes peace in the family and can avoid future misunderstandings. When it comes to your family property, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
So going back to the article here, Last year, the Supreme Court unsettled the legal landscape surrounding abortion by overturning decades-old case law protecting the practice, allowing states and territories to regulate abortion as they see fit. Guam's 1990 abortion ban was determined unconstitutional soon after enactment due to case law at the time, but the legislation was never repealed. And my suspicion is this, that, and of course it passed the legislature with 21 votes, a unanimous. My suspicion is that in a subsequent legislature, if anyone had moved to repeal Bell's law, it would not have passed, even though people would have known it was ineffective, because that was, the popular stance on abortion back in the last century. Going on, now Attorney General Doug Moylan is expected to move to dissolve the injunction placed on the old ban, which is preventing enforcement. However, that would prove a moot issue if the law is repealed. Quote, the direction I'm leaning towards before looking at codifying abortion access, let's settle what's going on with this Bell Areola law. And we're still reconferring on what the best route to go with is, whether it be brought through the courts or repeal legislation. But myself, I'm leaning towards repeal legislation as to make the question of Bell area law moot, Parkinson said. Now, I got to stop here and say, obviously, I disagree with Won't on the substance of his bill. I'm absolutely anti-abortion. It's a shock to me to see how our society is deteriorated so that people proudly advance the cause of taking the life of an innocent, unborn child. But Parkinson ran for the legislature. Legislatures make laws. So if you're a senator and you don't like Bell's law, then introduce your own bill to repeal it. If you don't like portions of Bell's law, introduce a bill to amend Bell's law. Don't just sit around and kvetch about how much you hate Bell's law, or try to find workarounds like chemical abortions and other things like that. So in a sense, I commend Parkinson because this is the way it's done, where you have a representative government. And I don't see him saying we need to have a referendum and all of the abortion chicken games. I have my own position, but I think that we should leave this up to the people. Are you pro-abortion or anti-abortion, Mr. Candidate? I think we should leave it up to the people. Yeah. Parentheses, I want to play it safe on this one.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah, we'll agree to disagree. So in that sense, I give Won't Parkinson high marks. That is exactly the way to do it. Introduce a bill to repeal it. His bill will have public hearings. People will have a chance to come out, testify at I more than likely would testify myself at the public hearing. I know there'd be a certain amount of suspense as to what I'd say, but that's the way it goes, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. And if 8 members of the legislature want to repeal Bell's law, so be it. And then, of course, the real benefit of this is the smoke out factor. Because there are some people that are pretty outspoken on this. Chris Duenas being one of them. Very outspoken on it. There are some on the other side that are very outspoken on it. And then there are some that, as much as possible, try to stay and defilade on this issue. But if a bill comes to a vote, it's a roll call vote. You either got to say aye or nay. And there's a real smoke out factor. And I think we would be surprised at the position that some people take who might pal around with the pro-aborts. But when it comes down time to voting, if they can't be excused to make a head call, are going to vote against it.
Pass.
Yeah, pass. I pass. Okay, going back to this article, the Civil Division at the Attorney General currently is preparing legal documents necessary to dissolve the injunction, according to Moylan. The AG said he anticipates filing documents within 30 days from his inauguration on January 2. That'd be about February 1, right, Jose? Moylan has said the Attorney General has a duty to enforce laws or challenge them in court and cannot simply ignore an existing law. Any filing to dissolve the injunction is expected to be met with challenges. Attorney Anita Areola, and once again, a little historical background here, Anita was co-counsel with Ben Su from the ACLU, procuring the injunction barring the enforcement of Bell's law. Bell Areola was the author of Bell's law. Anita Areola was the daughter of Bell Areola. So a real interfamily struggle there. Anita has talked about it from time to time, said that they still maintain a good mother-daughter relationship. And it's pretty snarky for me to say this, but they maintain a good mother-daughter relationship, unlike the kind of mother-daughter relationship that Anita would wish on other unfortunate daughters. Moylan, as you were, Anita Areola, who represented the plaintiffs in the case that struck down the ban decades ago, and who said was part of Guam People for Choice Coalition, and also is the daughter of Bell Areola, had said Moylan would have a fight on his hands if he tried to dissolve the injunction. Yeah, now telling Doug Moylan that he'll have a fight on his hands is kind of like telling Brer Rabbit, please don't throw me in that briar patch. That wouldn't just come from the coalition, but from doctors, nurses, and other involved in the lawsuit that challenged the abortion ban. It's a very general and very draconian ban, not just on abortion, but also on free speech, Areola told the Post. The 1990 ban wouldn't just outlaw abortion, albeit with very limited exceptions. It would also make it a crime to solicit a person to submit to an abortion. That could mean providing information on where to go to get an abortion. Decades ago, hours after the ban was enacted, the late attorney Janet Benschoof, then director of Reproductive Freedom Project, the Reproductive Freedom Project at the ACLU, was arrested after delivering a speech in which she said Guam women could obtain abortions in Hawaii, providing the phone number of a Planned Parenthood clinic in the state, the WAPO reported. Other senators may join the press conference Thursday, according to Parkinson, who said he intends to have co-sponsors for legislation that he will introduce. When asked if he felt there was enough support in the 37th to repeal the 1990 ban, Parkinson said the old ban is even more extreme than the Guam Heartbeat Act. Well, that's it. Guy's got a mind like a steel
understatement.
Trap. Yeah, which failed to become law last term. And in that sense, he was confident the votes may be there. Well, Parkinson, 9 people voted for the Heartbeat Act. The Heartbeat Act was introduced by former Senator Jelena Nelson and would have banned abortions at the detection of fetal heartbeat, earlier than many women know they are pregnant. So enough about that. Past AG Levin Camacho opined that the legislature exceeded its power under the Organic Act when it passed the old ban because it violated federal laws applicable to Guam at the time. Well, believe it or not, a Supreme Court decision is not a federal law.
Shouldn't that be in a decision by a judge and not the Attorney General?
Well, that was my take on it. If he had taken it to the district court and lost, fine, end of story. Yeah. The old ban was therefore void from the beginning and had no legal effect, according to Camacho. But of course, we know that it wasn't what Camacho did, it's what Camacho didn't do. Now, let's see who I got. I've probably got Frenchie, all the way from France, talking about Jungle Watch and Won't Parkinson. Go ahead, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing great. You're calling all the way from...
All right.
Wow.
France, yeah. So anyhow, I thank you for reading the article this morning about Jungle Watch and the analysis that Tim did. And, I read that article a couple of days ago when Tim was typing it. And what jumped at me is that the whole sexual abuse story and the silence of the majority is very similar to abortion, euthanasia, and also to gender dysmorphia or reassignment of gender. And basically the arguments are always the same. And one thing that they all have in common is that you have an active, very active, tiny minority like Parkinson who is very vociferous and advance things that most people know is preposterous and beyond comprehension. When you talk about gender dysmorphia, you're talking about castration, double mastectomy. When you talk about abortion, you're talking about the tearing apart of a baby in order to kill it. This is butchery, the type of things, and euthanasia now is done under the guise of helping older people, but it's basically getting rid of people that cost too much money for society. And to paraphrase Jordan Peterson, he was saying that it's similar, it's wrong from A to Z, and that Nazi propaganda, which we are facing now, is similar to what the Nazis did before in the late 30s, early 40s, and it was predicated on compassion and tolerance for certain people, but not for others. And we see that with Parkinson's argument. He's pretending to do something, but basically what he's backing up is something that is inexcusable. And it's only possible because the large majority of people that should know better keep silent, just like in the sexual abuse. And we see that it takes a few courageous people to move the needle. And I hope that facing this Parkinson try to make a new legislation that would allow for abortion, we will have a few courageous people that will come up. And I saw that yesterday, what's her name, called, and she had very good arguments against all this. And so this is what I wanted to talk about this morning for me, this afternoon for you.
Well, I'm glad you did, Frenchie. And I appreciate your taking the effort to call all the way. Hey, when are you coming back, Frenchie? We miss you.
After the middle of February. I still have a lot. I'm dealing with a lot of French red tape.
Okay. Well, we're looking forward to your...
If you think our administration is useless, you should come and try to deal with the French administration for a couple of weeks.
Okay, Frenchie. Well, thanks.
All right. Well, you guys continue the good job, and I will keep on listening.
Thank you very much, Frenchie. Always good to talk to you. Wow, all the way from France.
Red tape, sacre bleu.
No, red. Sakura, red.
Sakura red.
Okay. Biden's boners. On November 11, 2021, Biden stunned a somber Veterans Day crowd at Arlington National Cemetery when he awkwardly used the word Negro. While joking about his age, quote, I've adopted the attitude of the great Negro at the time, a squinting Biden said soon after laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Pitcher of the Negro Leagues, he went on, who went on to become a great pitcher in the pros in Major League Baseball. After Jackie Robinson, his name was Satchel Paige, a great Negro. Okay, here we go. I can't hear it.
It's over.
Oh, it's over. Okay, let's go, Brandon. That's why I can't hear it.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Before the attack. Torrential and nearly unending storms pounding California since Sunday, causing flooding, evacuations, power outages, and at least 17 deaths. Governor Gavin Newsom with this warning.
When they're saying this is a detour, don't test fate. Just because it looks clear doesn't mean it is clear. We've seen that over and over and over again.
With at least 3 more atmospheric river storms expected over the next week, fears of mudslides are growing. President Biden's back in Washington after a summit in Mexico City. While there, Biden told reporters he was surprised to learn about the documents found in a former office.
The president says what the documents are specifically is a mystery, even to him.
I don't know what's in the documents. My lawyers have not suggested I ask what documents they were.
But when they were found by lawyers in the D.C. office he kept, the president said they did what they should have done, turning them over to the National Archives. The Justice Department is investigating, and the president says,
we're cooperating fully.
Some Republicans have suggested the possession of the documents could have national security implications. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Republicans are also saying the president's being hypocritical after he condemned former President Trump for taking documents to Mar-a-Lago. Congressman James Comer tells Fox News.
Now we find out the documents that Joe Biden had that were classified, some of them pertain to Ukraine. I mean, there's so many questions here.
And no winner in the Mega Millions jackpot. Friday's estimated jackpot, $1.35 billion. America's listening to Fox News.
It all started with the brutal murder of a young married couple. Now, more than 40 years after the couple was found, investigators and forensic genealogists are cracking the case wide open to uncover a stunning second mystery.
Where's the baby? I said, well, wait, he had a baby?
We cross the country speaking with victims' families and those close to the case as we ask, what about Holly?
I just want to know what happened.
Available on FoxNewsPodcasts.com and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Listen to the all-new Bret Baier podcast featuring Common Ground, talking to lawmakers weekly from opposite sides of the political spectrum about the issues of the day and how Americans can find common ground in a politicized world.
That's just not happening on Capitol Hill. It takes leadership, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Along with all your Bret Baier favorites like the campaign, the candidates, the all-star panel, and much more. Available now at FoxNewsPodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The battle's on over what failed crypto firm FTX owes to whom. This as the company's due back in bankruptcy court today.
Ahead of today's hearing, the Justice Department seized millions of Robinhood app shares owned by FTX's founder, Sam Bankman-Fried. The Bahamas Securities Commission announced a couple of weeks ago that in early November, they seized $3.5 billion in FTX assets and will distribute those out to creditors once the bankruptcy case is settled. The new head of FTX says the Robinhood app shares should be used to repay debts, while the crypto lending firm BlockFi argues they should get the shares. At the heart of all of this mess is an effort by the new head of FTX to get the bankruptcy court to issue new orders that could allow the company to salvage some of its business to prepare for a sale. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
City of Cincinnati is suing the owners of the Williamsburg apartments in Cincinnati, where dozens of residents were displaced over the holidays due to poor housing conditions. The Fabelmans and the Banshees of Inisherin took home the top movie honors at the 80th Golden Globes last night in L.A. Steven Spielberg picked up the Best Director award for this Fabelmans and reflected on the journey to making the film, which is loosely based on his life.
Everybody sees all of us the way they perceive us based on how they get the information, but nobody really knows who we are until we're courageous enough to tell everyone who we are. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out when I could tell that story.
The Hollywood Foreign Film Press Ceremonies was broadcast on NBC. And a federal study shows that traffic crashes in the U.S. cost society some $340 billion a year. That's about $1,000 for each of the country's 328 million people. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Have a day and a happy new year from KFC.
House call for help. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin remains in critical condition after suffering cardiac arrest during a game Monday night in Cincinnati. Hamlin collapsed on the field after a legal hit. The incident has left some parents of young football players with mixed reactions.
My concern with my son playing has more to do with head trauma.
Dr. Jason Fond is the parent of a football player in Nanuet, New York.
Yes, I am concerned and try to be as vigilant as I can. The equipment's much better. At his age, the force is very low, so any risk of real injury is very small.
Joel Fields is a youth football coach in Biloxi, Mississippi.
You're going to get hit one way or another. Now, whether you get hit the proper way is what we're trying to instill in these players is, there's a way to tackle, there's a way to break down, there's a way to do things.
For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Tushar Saxena, Fox News.
From the gateway to the West, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie.
Nikola Tesla, the genius that he was born in 1856, was a Serbian-American inventor, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, and futurist, best known for his contributions to the design of the modern alternating current electricity supply system. He was really something. When he died, his office was raided. His papers were all taken. In a moment, David Sereda joins us. We'll talk about the life of Nikola Tesla and also the Washington Monument, built in the 1800s. Very strange situation there. David will explain that, too, when we come back. 2022 was the worst year for the stock market since 2008. What does 2023 hold, and do you really want all your eggs in one basket? Get diversified in your assets so you can do that at bullionmax.com/coast. At bullionmax.com/coast, you can buy physical gold and silver bars and coins, and they'll ship them directly to your home, fully insured. There you can store them in your safe for a time you might really need it. And if the paper money becomes worthless, if the stock market completely collapses, wouldn't it be nice to have something for emergencies? Start building your reserve at bullionmax.com/coast. And we put together a silver starter kit with a new feature this month. Listen to this. You're going to get a solid 1-ounce silver Australian Philharmonic coin, an Aztec calendar coin, and a Silver Dragon silverback. This one is cool, but they're only available at bullionmax.com/coast. And as with our custom packages every month, they go very, very fast. Protect your savings with silver at bullionmax.com/coast.
Tired of overpaying for your cell phone bill? Switch to Consumer Cellular.